And welcome to the program, folks. You're listening to Common Sense Radio. You can find me on Twitter at Oregon Redskin or on Facebook at Common Sense Radio. We're on IPMNation.com. We're on lanterns.buzz. All over the interwebs. I'm on CastBox, iHeartRadio, you name it, we are on it. Well, I want to come to you today to reflect on 9/11, September 11th, 2001, 17 years later. Beg your pardon. Where were you 17 years ago? I was in high school on the East Coast, out of a Northern Virginia school, Manassas Park High School. I was junior, and I remember the world stopping on that day. It felt like. I felt like we were at war. I felt like I was lost. I felt feelings I've never had before. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what was going on. I was living in a world that never had to deal with anything that I paid attention to like that. What we did that entire school day, I remember watching live on television the second tower getting this. It was the North Tower. The North Tower collapsing at 10:28. After the first tower went down at 9:59, the South Tower, all the teachers put up the news. We want to find out what was going on. And we were all shocked. We were all silent. We were all just a sense of remorse, a sense of what is going on, a sense of unbelieving what we are seeing with our own eyes. But as soon as we saw the news coverage with the other plane coming right around to hit the North Tower, we all just had a gasp of air. Oh my gosh, what's going on? We were all, just shocked. And then the rest of the day continued, we had the plane into the Pentagon, and a lot of students that I went to school with, some of the good friends that I knew, parents worked at the Pentagon, so they were scared to death. They were awed. They set up actually a room for people to go and be able to contact their parents and talk to counselors. It was a devastating day. Not only then, and I find it very traumatic today. I hit that feeling in my stomach that 9/11 is a day that we will never forget, and you shouldn't. As you get on social media today, I encourage you. I'm going to tweet it out over at Oregon Redskin. But there's a page from an article from the Washington Post with the most iconic photos from September 11th and its aftermath. And the one that I replay in my head. My memory, isn't as great from 17 years ago. It's gotten, not as good as remembering every moment that has happened during 9/11, but one thing I remember clear as day is the plane going into the North Tower. That is one thing, and that's the first picture. It was something that people will talk about forever. I mean, living a piece of history like that, not the kind of history you want to live, but living the part of history that just cringes at your stomach. And the next photo is it's something that just sums up a lot of emotions, a lot of words for me, is people jumping. It's a picture of a gentleman jumping out of the World Trade Center because it was, you had the JP5 jet fuel all over, burning. That's what people would do, would jump out of, that's how bad it was. They would jump out of a building because they didn't want to burn to death. There's another picture of a U.S. Customs volunteer firefighter, Michael Saber, drinking water from a fire hydrant in the rubble of the World Trade Center towers. Ugh. But if you go on social media, all you hear is Bush blew up the building. This broadcast will not be political. This broadcast is to make you remember, and for me to share my experiences with you from 9/11, which is such a somber day in American history. The thing that people fail to realize is we're all Americans. The day before, the day after, the day of, and today. I hope that today people can put politics aside. I hope they can put the issues of whatever political class, whatever political party, whatever you feel you need to talk about. Put that aside, whatever. And let's just remember this day, whenever we lost 3,000 Americans, and it changed a generation. It changed the world forever. George W. Bush was in Florida reading a book to a class whenever people came in and told him. And I just remember vividly seeing that look on his face the news put up, that he, was traumatized. You could see it in his face. And that's one of the pictures is his chief of staff, actually, wasn't Secret Service. Andy Card whispers into the ear to give him the word of the plane crashing into the World Trade Center. And then you go on to see pictures of a woman covered in dust. I mean, can you imagine what it was like just to be in New York City? My wife and I were talking about that today. And she graduated in 2004, so 3 years after the 9/11, and she went to New York City after she graduated high school. So it had been June 2004, and she remembers going down there and just looking around, going, "Oh my goodness! Can you imagine what they felt like coming into the city, looking up? Say it's 8:30, 9:30 in the morning, and you're just looking around." Getting your cup of coffee, enjoying the sights, going up to the World Trade Center to do some business, or you're visiting some family or friends that work there. And next thing you know, you see a plane crashing in and fire and rubble everywhere. And then the buildings collapse after the second plane flies into the North Tower. What do we do? What do we do to help those people? We absolutely should be helping those people, because it was dust for miles and miles and miles. And when she went in 2004, she said there was still rubble. This is before they started rebuilding everything, obviously. There's stories of policemen, firefighters, heroic stories. And every one of them are heroes. Every single one of those. They sacrificed everything. And they believed in the cause of good. And that's the love that matters. It absolutely is. They sacrificed everything. They didn't run away. They ran into the building. They ran into the building to help others, to love, to show their courage. They gave the ultimate sacrifice because they believed in the common good for everybody else. There's a story over at the Daily Wire about a sergeant to keep his protect his identity when running to help evacuate the towers, the areas are surrounding them to help. He remembers taking a couple of fellow police officers with him back to his house, and washing their uniforms, getting cleaned up, fed, and getting 1 hour of sleep to get back to help with Mayor Giuliani's order of the 1 million people in lower Manhattan being evacuated. I mean, that's a monumental task. But they completed it. They absolutely completed it. And this father, he when he returns home, he's looking at his children just going, thank you. Probably thank you, God, that none of you were downtown. None of you were in Manhattan. None of you were by the towers that collapsed. Some of the people that he worked side by side with were not as fortunate as he was. He ended up retiring in 2008, and he discovered he had bone marrow cancer. Thanks to chemotherapy and blood transfusion, he will not be joining the growing list of heroes that made the ultimate sacrifice to lay down their life on that day, September 11th, 2001. It kind of makes me emotional, one of the things I think about is where has the country grown in 17 years? Have we grown for good to come together to support each other? Have we come to support each other? Have we come to know that Americans are good are because we love each other? And the mainstream media, the politicians, notice I didn't say Democrat or Republican, the politicians seek to divide us. On a day like this, we need to come together and realize that 17 years ago, we need to support each other like we did on 9/11, on 9/12, on 9/13, 9/14. All those days, we need to seek to help each other. As you go through grief in life, I know myself, I've had the last 17 years, if I sit and talk or think about the terrorist attacks by these terrorists, because make no mistake, these were not accidents. These were terrorists that flew planes into the World Trade Center. Osama bin Laden said this before 2001, that he wanted to collapse the United States. He wanted to fly planes into the World Trade Center. And today, 17 years later, as I reflect on all the emotions that I've occurred, I think I've become a better man. I used to think, honestly, all Muslims are bad. All people that think differently than me are bad. But I'm proud to say that I actually seek friendships with people that have different points of view, because they make me better people. They make me grow with their opinions. And I sit there and want to listen to them out. I think of some times in my life where I was ready to go to war. Let's keep going to war. Let's go to war. Let's go kill all those doggone people that we think came over here and killed us all. Killed 3,000 people. Well, we're at war 17 years later. We've lost thousands upon thousands from the terrorist attack. We lost thousands from sending our boys and our men and women overseas to fight a war that, what's the end game? What is the end game? What's your motivations in finding out a war that continues on 17 years later? What's the motivation? I'm trying to figure it out myself. Oh, you'll hear people on each side. Halliburton. Oh no, we got to kill terrorists. We got to kill Muslims. And I think a lot of people have come to find out it's not all Muslims. I've served in the military, in the Navy, with people that are Muslim, that are great people. I've built relationships, friendships with many people that are the Muslim faith. It's the Islamist. It is people that decry the Western way of life. I mean, I think that's pretty given. And I just hope today that this is going to be a shorter broadcast than usual, but I just hope today that we can pay tribute to the men and women who saved lives 17 years ago. And let's go ahead. Let's take a moment of silence just for those people. Yeah. Another thing that people seem to forget, and I know they made a movie about it, but I think what it speaks of is the courage of Americans. The Flight 93, where we'll never know the full story. We'll never know the true story of what happened on there. But what we know is from phone calls that were between some of the passengers on there that were calling their loved ones, that were communicating down on the ground. But when they found out that the South Tower, the North Tower, had planes crashed into it, the Pentagon had a plane crashed into it, those are things people forget to talk about. They just talk about the towers. But to me, being that I was an East Coaster, the Pentagon, the Flight 93 in Pennsylvania, that had a huge, huge impact on me. And it still does. It makes me think, wow, the courage, the commitment to your fellow man that these people tried to overtake the terrorists that were trying to who knows, were they trying to fly that plane into the White House? Where were they trying to go? We will never know. Never know. They could be trying to fly it into downtown New York to take out as many people as they could. I mean, that's possible. It might not be probable, but it's possible. And I'm sure there's experts that come up, well, no. We have the tracking, what they were set on. I don't care. You could say all that. You never know what was going through these madmen's head. You do not know what's going on. But for them to just to think in their heads, okay, and they're thinking very fast, so they know what's going on. They give the ultimate sacrifice by overtaking that flight and forcing it to crash over where people cannot get the most injured. Or, I mean, I'm praying that's how it went down. Again, we don't know what happened. But the loved ones report that the people were going to overtake the plane and try and land it in an area where as little damage to the surrounding area could be as possible. And they did that in a field in Pennsylvania. So some of the questions I have for you that I've kind of snuck in there is, how have you grown in 17 years? Like I told you, I've grown a lot. I think for the better. I think if you're not growing for the better, you need to reevaluate what's going on in life. What has bettered you? What's bettered me is talking with people that I disagree with to be a better man each and every day. What has hurt you? What has hurt you? What's hurt me is the divide, that people stereotype certain people, that they come to these conclusions and they never say, hey, what would this person do for me if I had an emergency like 9/11? If I had a terrorist attack, would this person help me? I guarantee you I would. Oh, whoa, that person's a Republican, that person's a Democrat. Ooh, I'm not helping them. That's one thing I would not be thinking about if there was an emergency like that. And the last question I have, and I think it's a very important one, and it's something that I hope you sit here and reflect on. What can we do to better each other? I say talk. Or as my friend Riaz Patel would say, go listen. Listen. That's important. People have got to listen to each other. And I think Eric Erickson, and I retweeted it, I think he tweeted out this morning early, and it's spot on. 100 years after World War I, the British people still gather to remember. I do not know if we will do the same 100 years after 9/11, but I know that as long as we can gather and reflect, we should. Ordinary people became heroes that day, rising to meet the challenge. How can you not agree with something more than that? Tell me. It's spot on. So, as you sit here on 9/11, 2018, a couple things you need to do is you need to think how have you grown in the last 17 years to better your neighbor, to better yourself? What has bettered you? What has hurt you? And what can we do to help each other? So that's the main thing. Hey, I just want to thank you for tuning in today. God bless. God bless you. God bless all of our heroes that have gone and gave the ultimate sacrifice. And until next week, God bless you.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.